Hey everyone, SycraStream here, and welcome to this January SycraStream. Today, I'm joined by my special guests. You gotta mute it if someone has.
Yeah, I did. That was me. My bad.
All right. Today it had to be this way. It couldn't be. I tried to be professional.
Oh, sorry.
Special guest, Fabia. Fabia's doing the cats. The cat is Fabia, and then we have Bob Meatbag, a regular on the SycraStreams. For the second time, we have Mark, who is also you might know him as Moat DD, or Mark from Mark's drawing tutorials, and our extra special guest. No, it's not your mom. It's Willie.
Willie, go boom.
Yeah.
Hey, Willie. All right. So, Willie is a student artist, and he is trying to get better at art. He's already pretty good. But we thought we might try doing some critiques of his work. And also asking him, what's it like being a student? Because most of us on the stream are kind of doing art at a higher level, and kind of you forget some of the issues of what it's like when you're starting out. So yeah, that's that. And then we'll also be answering questions from the chat. So we already have, I guess we'll start with a question real quick. Do you have any cures for artist block? Have we talked about this last time? I'm not sure.
Well, I'm sure we've talked about it before. But
yeah, but okay. Cures for artist block. I mean, there's a remedy, preparation H. It's more of a. Sorry. No. The way I think of artist block, and if you're thinking about it as let's define it first, because maybe you have a different definition. But my definition is sort of when you can't really draw, you don't feel like ideas are coming, or you try and draw and your skill is much worse. One of the things go ahead.
It's like you're always getting stuck every time you try to draw. It's like there's something that's stopping you from drawing.
Yeah, that's blocking you in a way.
Yep.
And what I think is that this is perfectly normal, and at least for me, this helped to just
common,
and to know that often what's happening is a period of you processing things and not necessarily able to do them. So I had someone explain this to me a long time ago, and the way she explained it was there are seasons of development, and there's a spring season where you've got new growth. There's a summer season where everything's nice. There's a fall season where things kind of you harvest what you reap what you sown what you planted. And then there's the winter season where things seem dead and it seems like nothing's growing. I'm sure if you're in a tropical environment, it doesn't work that way. But anyway, there's a winter, let's say it's like a snowy area. And then under the on the surface, it looks like everything's not growing, nothing's there. But then under the surface, there's a lot preparing itself for the spring that is to come. So that's how I kind of think of the artist block. That's the winter periods where you kind of feel like, I can't do anything. But if you just stick with it, you don't give up, it tends to lead to a spring period where you are again productive. And
maybe it's like a hibernation period.
Yes. Yeah, maybe that.
That's like your recharge period, if anything.
Right. And what it did is, before, when I used to think of artist block, I would beat myself up and think, I suck. I can't draw anymore. What's going on? I used to be better before. I'm getting worse. And I would panic, and it didn't help. It wasn't like I was drawing more, because I would just get depressed, and then I need to find some a distraction, so I wouldn't feel so depressed. So hey, maybe I'll play games or I'll do something else. I'll watch a movie. But anything to get away from that, oh, I suck mentality. And then once I started embracing it in a way and understanding like, oh, it's a bad day. It'll last for a while, and whatever I'm doing, I'm still benefiting from it. For instance, even if I'm drawing figure drawings and they don't look good, I know a part of me is getting better with drawing the human figure. So by embracing it, not fighting it, what happened is I actually got to the point where the blocks got much shorter. So those periods didn't last forever anymore. It used to feel like it would last for a very long time, but now it's what, 2 weeks? I think it's about 2 weeks.
I just add to the what to do in the winter season. Like that's really a good time that you should be looking for new goals, knowing what you want to actually do with your art, and getting some inspiration in terms of like finding out, look, when you got into this art stuff in the first place, you saw somebody else's drawings, or you saw some cool movies, or you saw something really awesome that made you want to, keep drawing. That's what you're missing. I think is you might just be out of inspiration. Like the reason why I say this is we look at the very beginning where you've got your springtime of the ideas, and then the summertime of growth, the autumn time of harvest. The thing is, like, the art block comes immediately after the harvest. It comes immediately after a period of being able to create all these great drawings, and you're capitalizing on all your ideas and everything. You've got drawing after drawing after drawing. All of a sudden, you've run out of ideas. The inkwells run dry. And it's like, what do I do? And that's just because you've run out of inspiration at that point. Like, you have to start the machine back up again by figuring out what you want to do with your art. Figure out what's inspiring you again. Because I think what people might think is that they've seen something inspiring. They work their skills up to the point where they can draw the things that they want to draw, and they think, oh, this is great. Now I'm in a utopian ideal where I can just draw like this forever. It's like, no, that's not how it works at all. What happens is you work your skills up to that level. You make all the things that you can make of that, given that particular vein of ideas, and then eventually you will run out. Then you run into the winter season, and it's time to start looking for cooler and newer things.
Yep. That's a great point. Also, figuring out what your motivation is, because something I recently come to understand very clearly is that I appreciate a challenge, and when I feel like there's something I'm trying to figure out and I'm not good at it, but I am aware of a new deficiency I have. For instance, I'm really not that great with color. Okay, for a brief period, I'll really be interested and I'll make a lot of progress. But usually it's after I figure it out, when I figure out what I thought I wanted to understand, there's a high from solving the problem. And then there's suddenly a low where I don't actually have a problem to solve anymore. So what happens is I feel like I should be feeling good because, hey, I wanted that thing, right? And now I have that thing. And I've heard this from people who want to make money. And they're like, well, I want to buy this car. And they fixate on a goal. But as soon as they get it, it doesn't fill the hole that is in their heart. And but at the same time, if you frame it differently and you think, I like overcoming challenges, that's what I like. That's completely different then. Your goal is not, I want to understand color. Your goal is, I want to improve constantly and be challenged and then overcome and grow and be challenged again.
Right.
All right.
But I'd say it's like, the thing is that I find that usually when I start getting those goals and I start working to solve those goals, and I had that wonderful season of development, like the fact that I've actually accomplished that goal, it's like, once you kind of get past that area between spring and summer, and maybe you're starting to enter the autumn period, like that's a great time. That's where it's like you figured out how to solve problems. You spend your autumn primarily working on a lot of art that is about solving those problems, and it involves those new things that you've learned. That's a wonderful time. And I think it's when, after that, the end of that harvest, then once you're in wintertime, you should start looking for new goals, because the thing is, every time you solve a problem, every time you solve, when you suddenly find yourself able to do a thing that you couldn't do before, like that's a great victory. That's a wonderful thing. And then, of course, you're going to need to spend some time actually enjoying making art with this new thing you've learned. So in springtime, that's figuring out what are the problems you want to solve. Summertime, you spend developing those problem solving skills. Autumn, you spend that time making art with those solving skills that you've developed. And then, eventually you run out of ideas and it's no longer a new and novel thing to you, and it's not really that interesting. And so you enter your winter period again, in which case you should be finding another problem to solve.
Yeah. Okay.
Or finding new subjects that interest you.
So let's move on to the first critique. So, Willie, why don't you explain what you were thinking when or maybe we should start by you kind of explaining yourself a bit, your situation, and where are you with art? What are your goals?
My goals are to become a art professor. I want to learn enough art that I can teach it. I find that when the more I draw, the more I like explaining what I'm doing to myself, and I feel like if I can explain it to myself, then I would love to explain it to other people. So I want to become an art professor. With this drawing, I did one facing forward and one facing to the side. I was trying to rotate the figure in my mind, and with this one, I seen what problems I kind of had, but that was just me showing that I sent it so you can tell me what I'm doing. Sometimes we don't see them.
Okay. And this is from Imagination?
Yes.
So, all right. I feel you actually did a pretty good job. Possibly the first thing I noticed, though, is a lack of perspective in this, especially when it comes to the feet. Like, they're not on a ground plane. So it feels like he's off balance. But if I was just to take this leg and move it here, for instance, so now you have 1 foot here and then one back here, that is going to feel a lot more planted. I also think he does get a bit small on the way up. And usually from the crotch down to the feet is the same as from the crotch to the top of the head. So probably bring him up just a bit, give him a bit more of a head. And yeah, something like this. So I like to work a lot more simply and then start detailing things. Another thing you want to know is wherever the knee is pointing, whatever direction the knee is pointing, chances are the foot's going to be pointing in the same direction. There are minor exceptions to that rule, but usually that's the case. So I think you did a great job with the chest, and the serratus looks really nice. You've got some nice shapes going on with the arm. So yeah, I mean, you are doing a lot that is good. And
I think something you should focus on, Willie, is the bigger picture before the details, because it does feel as though you lost your way in terms of even with the stuff with the leg, where it's just like it seems to go way off. And I'm not sure if it was your intention, but what Sykra is doing is right now when he's focusing on the smaller or the larger and simpler stuff is that he's getting the whole picture. And then when he later goes into the details, all the organization is already done. So everything is in its proper place. It's good to try and fit, like what you're doing is good, but I think what happens is that you get caught up in the details.
Which is true.
Okay. I think another thing is like, can you see my screen? Like what I've got on my screen, there's this kind of a barrel that I've drawn over top of it.
yes.
So the purpose of the barrel is to show you that when you're looking at the feet, we look down upon the feet from like up above. Whereas if we're at the midsection, we're looking at it straight on. Whereas if we're underneath the head, we're looking up at the head. So what you would typically see would be if maybe if we're looking at the head, we would see something like this. We're seeing the head slightly from below, like that, and we're seeing the underside of the chin here. Does that make sense? Whereas over here, we'd be seeing something more like the tops of the feet. So we're seeing something kind of like this. So it's kind of this foreshortening, this constantly like changing foreshortening that's going to occur. So it's almost like there's a vanishing point, right? There's this shifting kind of vanishing point as you go higher, and you can see what's going. So this is what I think Sycra was meaning when he was referring to when he was saying that it was lacking in perspective. I think it's more like it's kind of lacking in this foreshortening effect.
Right. Yeah.
Curvilinear perspective.
Yeah, I never saw that before, that barrel technique. I never saw that before. That's new.
Yeah. I'm not saying that you have to draw a barrel on top of it, but I'm saying that as you go look downwards, you'll kind of understand that the objects that you're looking at are going to kind of, it's like we see the tops of them more, whereas in the middle, we tend to see them kind of flat on like that, and then underneath them, we see them from underneath.
Basically,
and it's this smooth transition.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a changing vantage point.
That's very good. No Sight says, do you guys sometimes start with perspective? I tried it and it seems to stiffen things a lot. I suppose the best way is to wing it and then fix with perspective lines. Kind of. I wouldn't say wing it and fix with perspective lines. So it really depends what you're doing. But one thing I found that combats that stiffness is not to start with a very accurate thing, but rather to build a basic form. So for instance, if I want to draw a head and I treat it extremely rigidly and get, all the perspective, and yeah, this is going to be in a box, and there's, a horizon here, and then there's my vanishing points, and then I make a box, and then I try and fit a head in that, chances are it's going to get stiff and it's not going to look very good. So what I try to do is I think about what is the thing that we see most often. And what we see when we look at people tends to be like big shapes. So I have to think as if I'm not drawing something, but rather I'm revealing something that's already there. I'm observing something, and my drawing is more putting down something that I can then look at and say, okay, now what? What does that look like? So if I have like a blurry shape for a head, I have a much easier time of seeing that, but I want to keep looking at it until, and kind of fleshing it out until I see more. And, you ask yourself questions like if then questions. So for instance, if this is the size of the head, where would the shoulder be? And here, again, I'm relying on the fact that I've seen people before. So I look at this and I think like, well, maybe there's a shoulder back here and there's a shoulder here. And yeah, like this is generally the area of the person. Okay, so now what I can do, so that's like a very basic framework. Now what I can do if I lower that, the opacity a bit, is think about fleshing things out a bit more. So maybe there's like a bigger shape to the head. What is this head shape? And where's the ear? Like that's a big one. Finding the ear placement and sort of just clarifying this as if it's coming into focus very, very slowly, but it's coming into focus. Now, at this point, I probably would consider the perspective. Am I looking up at this person or down? And it feels like I'm kind of at eye level. Maybe I'm a bit shorter than them. So maybe I'd see like slightly underneath their nose a bit. And then they would have their eyes. And what would that look like? And again, it's a lot of assuming you actually know this stuff and trusting that you know what people look like. You see people all the time, rather than treating it like, well, I've got to look up a tutorial or a formula or something. It's more, no. There's a person here. I need to reveal it, and I need to put down what I already know. With that said, you still need to you need to understand anatomy and stuff. Otherwise, you won't know where things go. But I couple that with what we already do have, which is a knowledge of what people look like. If you didn't have that knowledge of what people normally look like, then if someone looked weird, you wouldn't know it. But you would, because if you saw someone and one of their eyes was like 3 centimeters lower than the other, I'm pretty sure you would notice. You would be like, huh, that person's eye is 3 centimeters off. But when you treat it like a drawing and you put an eye down and it's 3 centimeters off, you're not going to see that as an error usually. But if you don't treat it like a drawing and you treat it like what you're looking at is a real person, where is their eye? You're more likely to put it in the right spot. So here
because you're going to be relying more on a feeling where you feel things should be.
Exactly. I'm using intuition because our intuitive brains are extremely powerful. And to not have that is very limiting, I think, to not engage in this part of yourself that is there.
It's like when Sycra originally put in that airbrush, when he first airbrushed that thing in, it's like, okay, we've got something we've got our subject there, but it's a little vague and out of focus. But the thing is that your memory of where things should really go, or your knowledge of where things should really go, can be used to, where we're using that to help bring it into focus. We're using that to say, okay, well, I see this kind of a blurry blob, but if I had to guess where in that blurry blob the eyes really should be, or where the nose should be, or where these things should be, like this thing allows you to help fill in the blanks of the blurry blob that you're seeing.
Yep, that's pretty much it. You're making blurry blobs and seeing stuff. It's very similar to looking at clouds and seeing things in clouds. So, and where this comes back to perspective is now I am employing perspective, but not in the sense of rigidly putting down vanishing points, but rather considering, for instance, what are the planes of the head, and if I was looking at this, then what? Where would the turn of the head be? Now, I need to know anatomy to do that. I need to understand, well, the turn of the head kind of happens at the temple, and you've got a plane facing this way, that way, and then it turns here and it goes that way, and that, you could say that creates the box and it's in perspective. But it's sort of, and this is something I'm focusing on more and more, but separating art from just theory and bringing it into, like, if you think of perspective and you think of vanishing points and horizon lines, you're doing it wrong. Perspective is how you see the world. It's where are you in when you're looking at something.
It's
so
like your vantage point. It's
exactly
where are you putting the camera?
Yes.
The camera's location.
Exactly. So
It's black. Oh, I didn't hear the last few things you guys said.
I was saying, well, Mark was saying it's like a vantage point perspective.
It's a vantage point. It's like the location of your camera.
Yes.
So if you were to take a picture with like a cell phone camera, right? Where would you hold the cell phone camera to snap the picture? That's what a perspective is. A perspective. So you can say that something can be
my
seen
connection
from.
just shut down because I can't really hear anyone.
All right. Well, we're still going to have.
He can catch it after the stream is over.
Yeah, we're going to have this recorded, so maybe you can.
Hello.
After.
Somebody needs to type to him in the chat.
Okay.
I'll type it.
Okay. All right. So the other thing is, because you're asking if-then questions, you can ask, for instance, okay, if this guy's in a room and there's a door behind him, where's that door going to be? Well, how tall is he? Like, first ask yourself that. How tall is this person in relation to a door, and how big are doors? And if you don't know how big doors are in relation to people, that's a good opportunity to find that out. Look around you, look in your environment. You might see, well, there's a door behind him and the top of it's there. And since it looks like, we're sort of, his head's like at this angle, maybe the door is more like this. And, there's an area where the door would attach. There's the hinges. There's a lot that you could put down just based on asking yourself, well, if this is the case and this person is this tall, where would other things be? You know, if he has a necklace on, what would it look like? Would it look like this? Like a lot of people will do things like this. Like that's a necklace. Okay, he's wearing a necklace, and they go like that. Okay, what's wrong with this? What's wrong with this picture? If this it goes like that, I mean, it's cut.
It doesn't look like it's falling on the, like it's not following his collarbone, his like his upper torso properly. It's like
Exactly. So
it's not following gravity. It's like it's not obeying gravity properly.
Yeah. So you have this necklace, and it's going to follow the form of this torso. It's going to come around like this, and it's also going to be at an angle because your neck is at an angle. If you're not sure about that, if you're not sure about the angle of your neck, just look at your collar. Whatever you're wearing right now, if you are wearing something, look at your collar and feel the back collar versus the front collar. Like put one hand on, let's say, you know, this is side view head. Put one finger where it touches the back of your neck and put one finger where it touches the front, and you'll notice there's an angle to that. So again, you're not doing some kind of rule like, well, 3 eyes down, there is a neck or something like that. Or, you know, any kind of measurement. What you're doing is really considering stuff you should already know. And if you don't know it, you can figure it out by a process of asking yourself a question. And it's not about not thinking. It's about actually thinking much more carefully and drawing less. So you're actually spending a lot less time putting down the basic drawing, and you're spending a lot more time actually considering what would this be. And as you do this more and more, you get faster at it.
It's
so
like a lot of the atelier studies where they would get you to memorize proportions and say, okay, you have to put a dividing line here, and then you got to cut it this way and do like it's like, imagine if you were having to cook a really, really complex dish and you had to have the recipe in one hand, but your other hand, you can't like beat the eggs and, you know, stir the soup or do all these other things when you've got the book in one hand and you're staring at the recipe. Like it's really hard to work that way. Whereas it's usually, I think it's like what we're doing here is something more akin to, you're cooking and you're like, you take a sample and you're like, oh, this needs some extra salt. This needs some extra, you know, needs more, could probably go well with some mayonnaise, or, you know, that's what it is it's a little bit more intuitive. It's knowing kind of what the end result is and just, you know, going based on feeling as opposed to going based off of a rigid set of rules.
Right. So when I think this way, what really matters more than other things that, like, you know, measurements or anything like that, is sort of an understanding of the natural world, and to treat yourself not just as an artist, but in a way a bit of a scientist, someone who's observing things and figuring things out. Like, for instance, you might say, well, I want to light this, and how do I shade? And the first thing you could think, if you're thinking about it, it's a very general big picture approach. So if I was thinking about this and I thought the light's coming from above and I want to shade it, one of the things I could do is start with a darker tone going all the way from the bottom up. And what that's going to do is it's going to say automatically there is less light hitting him lower down as it does at the top. And I exaggerated it just for effect. But starting with that basic gradient would be the easiest way of creating the big picture. The next thing you could say is there's another big picture, which is his head. His head is basically an egg-like object. So ignoring all the features and everything, I could shade this as if it was an egg. I could shade the torso as if it was an egg. I could shade the neck as if it's a cylinder. And over time, it will start to look like a person now because I'm using a multiply layer. It kind of gets unruly, but there's another way around it. It's the same exact thing, but it's reversed. So what you can do with that is, actually, there's a couple of things. So let's just say I'm going to make a gray and set this to multiply. It's not really important what I'm doing. I'm just doing it as a demonstration. But I'm going to turn this down. So now it looks like the lights are off in this environment, right? Okay, so the lights are off. So now let's add some light. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new layer, and I'm going to set it to, let's just say, linear dodge. It doesn't really matter what I use. And I'm going to create a light. And let's say this light is kind of blue. Okay, so where's the light coming from? Let's just say it's coming from the top down. Okay, so I'm going to start with a light coming from the top down and going all the way down. All right, so now this guy is lit, right? But it's kind of like he's lit without any form. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a mask on this. And again, I started with the top, and then I lit it, and it went down. So there is more light at the top and less at the bottom. If you want to look at the values, so here's a light side at the top, and the value is here. And here's a light side at the bottom, and the value is much lower. So there's a natural gradient right there. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in that mask that I just made, and I'm actually going to paint black, which is going to hide the layer, but I'm going to paint it where the light wouldn't hit. Okay, so it's not going to hit underneath the eyeball, for instance, or the brow. That's going to be obscured from light. So, oops. So here, I'm painting in, but what I'm really doing is hiding the light. And this is actually how light works. You're hiding it. It's like light is not getting into certain areas. Okay, so under the nose, anything that's facing away from the light is going to get a bit darker.
It's almost like if light was coming down from a sprayer. Like, let's say your light bulbs, your light source, they're all spraying light. The areas that are going to stay dry are the shadows.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. Okay, so underneath the neck is gonna get darker, but I'm not gonna focus too much on the cast shadows right now. That's where light is blocking things, but just the underplanes of things. Things are catching less light. So actually, the brow across here doesn't catch light. So it means you don't think of the eye sockets like a thing, like a thing that begin and end here and here. You treat this as a plane, right? We're in this plane, and you don't get light underneath here. You don't get light underneath the chin, so let's put that in. And then, you know, the ear is kind of tilted, so this part's facing more down. So that, you block out the light there. And, okay, underneath the cheek, this is getting less light because this plane is facing a different direction. And then this is a side plane, so that's getting less light, and this is a side plane. So I'm treating it as a very simple thing. You know, the underneath the pec muscle, there's less light because that, again, is a rounded form. Okay, now I'm going to do the next thing, which is I'm going to put in cast shadows. So now I'm going to use a hard brush because cast shadows are hard, usually. And I'm going to start blocking out shadow shapes with a cast shadow. So the shadows are going to be darker, and they're going to be more sharp. So underneath the lip, that upper lip might cast a shadow on the lower lip. And then the lower lip will cast a shadow on the chin. The entire head is going to cast a shadow. And that head is probably going to cast a shadow all along that neck and even on the upper torso. So here, there's going to be an area that's in shadow. And you can see that it's starting to look pretty convincing, pretty three-dimensional. And so I'm not the ear would also cast a shadow. So I'm thinking about things in a very generalized way and then getting more specific. So you have an eyeball here, and the upper lid would cast a shadow onto the eyeball itself and onto the iris and pupil. You would have the eyelashes, which cast a shadow as well. So, you know, you're breaking it down into subforms, but it's identical to what you start with, just in a smaller and smaller way. So anyway, that's why perspective is stiffening when you work with vanishing points and stuff. This is sorry.
Cynics is here. He's in chat.
I visited your stream for the first time on Twitch a few days ago. It was interesting.
Oh,
all right. So, wow, that's a cool cat. So for people who are asking, Flavia is the one drawing the cats. Mark is the one drawing a face in perspective. Looks like we're looking.
I'm gonna try drawing a variety of them from different perspectives and different angles.
Cool. And Bob's drawing.
Oh, thanks.
That's pretty good.
Bob's drawing cool ghouls.
It
Cool
kind of
ghouls.
maybe it's just the mask reminds me of Darkest Dungeon on the guy with the long nose. He reminds me of the
Yeah.
what were they
The
called?
plague bearer, the plague doctor.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got a plague doctor.
You are a fellow player of Darkest Dungeon.
No, I haven't. I just know of the lore of plague doctors. Those things, those long noses, they would usually have like a whole bunch of like potpourri and like things in there because the going theory at the time was that diseases were caused by bad smells.
Yeah, and then they stuff the long noses full of herbs and stuff, right?
Yeah, that's right. They do that to protect themselves because they figure that as long as they're not inhaling the stinky smelling stuff, they'll be okay.
Yeah.
They were close, but they didn't have germ theory at the time.
Yeah.
The whole germ theory thing hadn't developed until much later.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
By then, they were still thinking of miasmas.
I have asthma.
Not my asthma, miasma.
Oh, now I get it. Well, Favia's not drawing her cat. She's drawing a cat. Flavia, do you want to talk a bit about your cats? You get asked a lot about the cats, and I realize you actually don't get time to talk about it.
Sorry. Well, I don't know what am I supposed to say about the cats. I'm just drawing the cat from imagination because I wanted to get a bit more practice with stuff with cats, I guess, and I kind of default to drawing them now, and I don't know. It's not my cat, it's just my cat.
It's very good, man. It's a lovely cat. I like chips. I like the fur. It looks like fur, and also the background. It looks very nice to bring the cat out and to make look like a three-dimensional object. Also, the fur is very soft. Making Yevson says cat is making me a fairy. Well, Yevson, let me tell you what.
No.
Making you the fairy. You got to learn where is the coming from deep inside your subconscious. That's where.
Oh, Jesus.
That's not what I was going for.
No, it's not fake Russian accent. I wouldn't do that type of fake accent. It's totally train wreck accent. So he was doing maybe something slightly, Persian or something, but then completely screwed it up. That's what accent is. All right. So... Scuba Dog says, I just realized that I've sort of been assuming Sycra and Cynics are the same person. We are. I draw so well and paint so well. You can see my paintings on Paint Explorations. That is all me. I am the best.
Whatever.
The God Emperor.
It was me all along. I give art tips. And,
It was me, Wario.
yes, I am best. All right. Well, it looks like Willie dropped, unfortunately. So, I guess we could go through some of his other works while he's not here. That way,
Let's just unleash the critiques.
All right, Bob. What
All
do you
right, the
think?
gloves come off.
Will, you're gonna get a butthurt reaction from this afterwards.
What do you think about this one?
And then he's gonna tune into the video on demand. Oh, he's back.
Oh, shit.
Behavior.
Hey, cool.
Oh man,
You didn't miss anything, Willie.
Shut down.
You
Sorry.
didn't know. We were totally not talking shit about your work.
Yeah.
Never be
It's
an
fine,
artist
man.
or-
You're a really nice guy. We all think very well of you.
Nah,
Yeah.
I was listening the whole time, guys.
Oh my
No.
God.
Hey, Willie, listen. I was just going with the crowd, Willie. Like, I got nothing to do with these folks.
You
Hey,
guys
man,
are
I'm just
horrible.
under pressure, dude.
Take responsibility for your life, man. You made the choice. You did it too. You are guilty as well as I am.
I'm leaving, guys. I'm not coming back.
No, come
Oh, man.
Well, the chat says they didn't realize I left, so that's humbling.
Oh.
Don't worry, Willie. We all experience that something together.
They're all meanies.
They are mean.
The Armenian.
Okay. Jormungandr? Is that Flavia? How do you spell Jorn or pronounce Jorn?
Jormungandr?
Jormungandr. Is that it?
Oh, it's
That's like- Yeah, that's like the snake that eats itself. Or no, that's the Ouroboros.
That's the Ouroboros.
How to
Yeah,
develop a
what's the
consistent
difference
art
between
style?
Jormungandr and Ouroboros? Because I know Ouroboros is definitely the snake that's like coiled up into a tail, into like a circle.
Jormungandr. No, I'm not even sure if I'm saying it right. But anyways, it's the one that Thor fights, right? It's from Viking mythology.
Hmm.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm. Hmm. Hmm. Anyway, do you know how to develop a consistent art style? Mark, what about you? What do you know about consistent art styles?
I think, like I think if you want to develop a consistent art style, that means that you're that means that you're drawing things in many, many different situations, and yet it all feels like it's done by the same person, and the character always feels like it's the same character. And to that, well, the thing is, one thing that people always worry about is same face, right? Where all of their characters look the same. So so you're actually going to have to do a bit of a sacrifice in the sense that, yes, you will gain consistency with your art style, but you may wind up suffering from same face. And that's because you're going to start finding that there's ways to simplify your way of drawing something. And also another thing I like, one of the things that gives me a lot of consistency in this case is I've got a very, very simplistic way of drawing things. I always draw them the same way. I always use the same methods. And I always go through the same kind of thinking process. So that always generates, hooray, the same similar results, right? Like very similar results. It's just that only the situation changes. The angles will change, the expressions will change, but the style always looks the same. And so, and the thing is that the style can be many different things. It can be how you choose to pose characters, how you choose your bank of library, like your library of facial expressions, the kinds of hairstyles that you like to draw. Or it can also mean things like how you render things. How do you handle lighting? How do you handle shading? What tools do you use? And again, what is the process by which you do the lighting and the shading and the rendering, or your inking, or those kinds of things. And usually the consistency from the art style just comes from doing it that way for a long time. You gain the consistency because if you had to do animation, for instance, nothing gets you consistency like having to do animation, because you have to draw the same thing over and over and over again. And eventually what'll happen is your brain starts to turn to oatmeal, and you start to become more efficient, meaning that anything that takes too long, you stop doing those things. If things are too annoying, take too long to do, eventually they will work their way out of your system, and then whatever remains is what you rely on, and that gains you consistency as well. So you don't get consistency immediately, you gain consistency over a long span of time of working with the process, especially in the case of animation or comics or cartoons or things which require the repeated drawing of something over and over again. You'll gain consistency of art style if you were working as, on commissions, for instance, and you were doing regular commissions for people constantly. Eventually, you would gain that consistency. It's something that actually kind of comes as a byproduct of repeatedly making artwork.
Yep, that's a perfect answer. All right. Well, I've been drawing a bit on this one, and what I felt with it is you're pushing the leg back, and so you have to create more of a crease, I think, in the buttocks region to make that feel like it's going back. Also, I felt like the shape you had in general was a bit, I don't know, loopy. So one of the things I recommend is this tentacle technique, where you kind of reduce the leg into this triangular shape, and then when you do that,
Tentacle technique.
yeah, it's
Please be gentle, Oni-san.
So basically, you start at the top, and you get to the bottom, and you kind of create like a triangular shape. And then the goal is when you do the form of the leg, you stay within that shape. And you can see how kind of it sort of did, but it gets a bit thicker here. And this isn't like that you always have to do this, but it is a helpful way of being consistent. So what I did is I made it so these are tapered a bit shorter than what you had, or like thinner. They get thinner in a very consistent way, so it's more fitting in a triangular shape. That's not to say there's no bumps or anything. It's just that the bumps that are there, they hit the border at a certain spot. Yeah. So when I started drawing, I don't do it so much anymore, but for a while I was doing this where I'd kind of create like a loose gesture, and then I keep the major forms within that. And then, yeah, maybe the back feels like it's a bit on the small end. So what I would say with the back is, I noticed it was there in the other one as well, how you have this sort of a narrowing as if you've got a constant 3/4 looking up at the person thing, where everything's getting shrunk as it gets towards the top. So when you have something you're doing consistently, it's really important to acknowledge that and to notice it, because that's a tendency you have. And so when you notice a tendency, you definitely want to nip that in the bud as soon as you can, so that it doesn't become a bad habit. So it's something you can deal with. So yeah,
I think what I would say is sometimes when we're drawing, we feel the need to go in and draw all the little details. Like when you're drawing a leg, you're going to be working your way down, and you're going to be like, oh, there's like a knee, and there's like a lumpity bump here and a lumpity bump over there. I better draw those things so I don't forget them. And so what happens is you're trying to get all the lumpity bumps all the way down the whole thing. I think what Sycra has just done when he drew the first 2 strokes and captured the leg with that, it's like, I'm just going to draw the whole leg. Who cares about the foot? Who cares about the toes? Who cares about the lumpity bumps? I just need to get that leg to look like it's in the right place. And then he went back and then said, all right, now I'm going to capture the lumpity bumps where I think they'll fit within that whole the whole overdrawing of the leg. It's kind of like the same thing he was doing with the airbrush, right? It's like, let's just capture the whole thing with the airbrush. Let's defocus, but there's no details. But then I'll go in and I'll capture the details afterwards where I think they belong somewhere within that fuzzy stuff. So in this case, it's with line. It's the same process, but with line.
Yeah, basically. All right. Okay, so let's take another question if we have one. What's a day life like as a professional artist? Oh, well, no.
A day like as a professional artist. Oh gosh, I think if you're, do you mean a successful professional artist or a?
Oh boy.
Yeah. I know it's such a loaded thing. Well, I mean, go ahead, Sycra. That was a question for you. I'll let you answer first. Go ahead.
Well, I don't know. It's a lot of
swing at that.
For me. So right now, I'm mostly surviving off freelance work and students and stuff. So it's a lot of drawing and painting, and it's kind of tedious. So right now, one of the big things are finding things to listen to while I do the work. That's like stuff. Audiobooks or something to keep me occupied, because Otherwise, it gets kind of boring. But it's all right. I would say it's like, okay, it can be bad in a way. You might think, oh, this is kind of boring or whatever, until you meet people who have real jobs, and then you realize it's okay. You know, I get to draw. It's not so bad. But yeah, it's fairly mundane, I guess, for me. Do I ever show my freelance stuff? No, I am not. And yeah, the stuff I do for money right now is more stuff I don't really show. And I found that it's harder to make money as Sycra doing freelance work than it is as just make another identity and make money that way. Anyway,
what I do commercially could not be shown on YouTube due to YouTube terms of service.
all right. Okay, so I think Willie, most of your critiques are going to be similar. Start with the bigger shapes. With this one of the skulls, I would, again, ask yourself, does that really look right? Like, okay, you tell me, looking at the skull, does that look right to you?
No, no.
Okay, so what's wrong with it?
Perspective's off.
That's a very general question. What's wrong with it? What do you see that's off?
The cheekbones are off. The muzzle.
And in what way? What way are they off?
Where it should be, where my left, the left eye should be a bit smaller and lower than the right eye. Yeah, the muzzle is poking out way too much. The cheekbones don't line up at all. Yeah.
Okay, so what you want to do is really try fixing it as much as you can and spend more time, rather than making a drawing and being done with it. Think about it more that you're trying to get it to be right and really look at it. And sometimes this means taking a break, or actually most of the time it means taking a break and then revisiting your drawing. Like go do something else for a while and then come back and then look at it and ask yourself, what do I see? Does this look right to me? And then ask yourself these questions, because as you demonstrated, you have ideas about what this could be. And it's really important to test that. And lately I'm finding out more and more that I haven't been approaching art in the right way. And I won't even say something like I wasn't smart enough. I just had ideas that didn't quite pan out. But more than anything, I think I wasn't believing that I could see as much as I would if I really asked myself, what is off about this? And don't treat it like I'm not. Well, what's off is that the perspective's off and I suck, right? That doesn't work, because that's not enough. That's not going to help you. But if you really ask yourself, if this was real, if this was a model and I was, or it was someone else's picture and I was looking at it, what do I notice? And don't leave it wrong. Like, don't leave it where it's, oh, I can see this is wrong and this is wrong and this is wrong. And what? And then you did something else?
I think that the more over time I've gotten to the point where when I work on something, I'm constantly dialing and adjusting it. I'm always like, okay, so maybe the brow wasn't drawn right, and maybe it should be a little higher. Like, I don't just say it's off, it's out of alignment. I can say, well, then what is the proper alignment? How do I adjust this? How do I mush this thing around until it is in proper alignment? That's the dialing process, right? You dial it in until it looks the way you think it should. So you need an adjustment process. Then you can constructively start moving your work to what you want it to be, what it should be. And the other thing is to kind of get to the point where you're noticing these problems sooner, not an hour after, or not like the next day, but being able to work and constantly being aware of, whether or not things are going astray. because you want it while you're actually working on the drawing, not a day later.
Yeah.
You need a better feedback mechanism, I suppose, like a real-time feedback mechanism, not the day later feedback mechanism.
I think it was Richard Schmidt who says, never knowingly leave anything wrong on your canvas.
All right.
And I think that's a very good piece of advice. Like, of course, it doesn't mean you're going to be perfect. It doesn't mean you're going to know everything. But if you do know something's wrong, try not to leave it at that. Especially if you found you did a pretty good job with this 3/4 view here. This one's pretty nice. Maybe I'd put the cranium a bit further back, but overall it's fairly nice. But this one, you really had problems with, so that should be okay. Pull up your sleeves, and you're going to be drawing that view and figuring it out. And trust that you can. Trust that it's not going to be impossible. You are capable of doing this. And find whatever reference you need, like whatever tool you need to accomplish these things, whether it's looking up skulls and doing studies of those, or just observing more. Use whatever it takes, but try to make it so you are in control of your drawings, and it's not just, well, I don't know this thing, and I guess especially if you're beating yourself up, that's definitely not the place you want to be, where you're like, I suck, I'm no good. I must
find the path forward.
Yeah.
So it's like it can't just end with it's out of alignment and it's terrible. It's like, okay, then what's the proper alignment? Yeah, you need something actionable, something you can act upon.
Yeah.
What should I do next? And yeah, that's what you need.
All right, let's see. Oh, Cat's coming along nicely. Bob's coming along nicely.
Yeah.
Jesus. I just noticed the eyeball one.
Oh, sorry about that.
That's okay. Does that make sense, Willie? Like, are we?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna do exactly that. When you said keep drawing it and know that I can get it right, that's probably what I'm gonna do right after the stream. Is I'm gonna draw like 100 of these heads and see what I'm doing wrong, instead of trying to get it done.
Yeah, repetition really helps a lot, because sometimes like the second and third time you do it, it's going to be different because you've got the experience from doing it the first time and making a bunch of mistakes, and then the second time and the third time and the fourth time, even though it's the same exercise, the fact that that you would do things a little differently on the next time, that's what makes it different.
Yep. That's looking great, Mark. I really love the structure of it. It's reminds me of Bridgman quite a lot. I'm thinking
Skeletor. Yeah. I think that's another thing, is that when you draw skulls, don't just think of it as I'm drawing a skull. Like, I'm drawing someone's skull. Like, I'm drawing Skeletor. It's like, that's then, because the thing is, then you can start actually adding some personality to it, and you can start thinking of it less as just this raw object, and actually think of it. I don't know. I just find that it might be a little bit more interesting when I think of drawing skulls as different characters, as each skull having a different characteristic to it.
This is a skull of my mean landlord.
This is my waifu's skull.
What a push that for?
This is my baby skull.
No.
You have to go there.
I have to. I have to.
Not my baby, not my baby. All right. Asia Deshay asks, have you ever had trouble with art lean? I don't know what learn? No, art lean, where your art leans to one side and ends up slanted. Yeah. I understand.
Oh, okay.
Art lean. Okay, I didn't know that was the term for it.
One thing that really helped me, one is of course always flipping the image. I should do that a lot more often. But another thing that's really helped me is to just somewhere along the way, somewhere on the page, just draw a straight line, or a horizontal line, to something to indicate, so that, you know, because your eyes can play tricks on you. Sometimes it's leaning and then you think it's fine. But if you have a straight line somewhere and it's just completely perfect, then you'll always have that reference there. And then whenever you draw and then you reference back to this, oh, okay, so this is slightly tilted. And you'd be surprised at how much that perfect line can just immediately show you where you're imperfect. But yeah, that's what I do.
Yep. I noticed with Mark's drawings, his cursor itself has like a perfect horizontal and vertical crosshair thing on it.
Yeah,
That helps a lot. Yeah.
That's really cool. Yeah, exactly. Like what Bob said, I've been using the same thing too. In Procreate, you have these things called drawing guides, and I do flip a ton, but I also use drawing guides at times where it just gives you like a grid, and you can make it bigger or smaller, and it really helps to have like a pure vertical, pure horizontal. You know, this is what that looks like, and then use that, and eventually, you know, it's kind of like a I suppose a training wheels or a crutch. And the thing with crutches, you know, sometimes people say, you know, you don't want to use a crutch, but a crutch is there so you can heal and you don't need it anymore. A crutch is never meant to be a permanent fixture.
You'd be surprised of just how much those, because even now it's when I use those lines, it's like it's not at the beginning it's a crutch, but the more you use it, the more I start thinking about it subconsciously. So it's just like, if I'm not using it, I just, in the back of my head, it's like, is this really okay? Have you flipped it? Have you drawn the reference line? And then immediately I go into it and I do it, and then I check, and it's like, oh no, I haven't. It's really noticeable. At some point, it just becomes not only habit, but also a way to just check yourself, because it's really easy to just think that whatever you drew is okay. It's like, yeah, that looks fine. I don't need to check. It's like, no, you should really check it. And like Sycra said, it's like, you know, you use it to heal yourself, but eventually it's not just a crutch. It just becomes another tool. You know, it's a good way to check yourself, basically.
Yep, absolutely.
And also I find it's like, you know what, this art stuff is really hard. This art stuff's really hard, and when you're doing lots and lots of it every day, it's like, man, I could use all the help I can get.
Yeah.
So I don't worry. Like, usually what I'll find is I won't do a thing if I find that it costs me more time. If I find that something is saving me lots and lots of time every day, oh man, I'm all over it. Like, I feel that being a Puritan, right? Like trying to be art pure all the time and saying, oh, I must never do this thing. I must always do things always the hard way. And eventually what happens is I find being a purist just makes me really bitter and angry in the end. And no one really cares about how the art like got made in the first place. Like they don't care that I, you know, outside of like actually tracing somebody else's work, which is plagiarism. Okay, that's probably the only time I would say you suck. But outside of that, like, you know, any kind of other trick that you use, like using reference and guidelines and you know, various helpful tools and line stabilizers, like these things are all wonderful things. And if they improve the quality of your work and your clients like your work more, and you're getting the work done sooner and faster, and you're doing more of it, I don't see a problem.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember what it is that you're training when you're using the stuff like you know, a reference line, just whatever it is that you use to check for flaws. It's that you're not just checking for flaws, you're leveling up your eyeball. You know, because like if you look out for flaws and you notice them, and then if you get to the point where it's just sort of like where you don't even have that reference line around, and you just feel as though something's off, and that means, oh, it's paying off. You know, you're training your eye. And one of the best ways to just train yourself is to just find out where the flaws are and then correct it.
And usually what I find when it comes to being able to minimize, go for minimalism, where you're drawing fewer and fewer lines, like the reason why I wind up becoming minimalistic is after a while I find that I'm able to see it, and I'm able to see what I'm trying to draw without the need of the guideline. Like at that point I feel like, oh man, I having to draw these guidelines as a formality, and it's actually costing me time and eventually I stopped drawing the guidelines altogether. That's when your work becomes more minimalistic, and then you don't have to draw all the guidelines. Like that's what I find. When the tool starts to slow you down, stop using it. Like if you're not losing anything from not using the tool.
Yep.
All right.
It's like a lot of times when I draw ahead, sometimes I don't even draw that midline that goes straight down the middle, or I don't draw like the typical crosshair. So the crosshair over the ball, meaning this, right? This little kind of crosshair, which shows which way the face is pointing. Like I often find myself not drawing that because I can already kind of tell. Like I'll actually just go in straight and draw eyes and eyebrows, and I can get the face feel like it's at a 3/4 perspective and turn to the side. Because there's no, like, you just feel that you don't need it after a while. But I would say draw on all the guidelines you need, draw on all the guidelines that help you out. Maybe at first it is a formality, but when you start finding, hey, I don't really need these guidelines anymore, I can already see what the next step is without having to draw them, then yeah, you can throw it out. You can throw out that step.
Yep. Yeah, I think what you're talking about really is a matter of what is art to you. Is art to impress your fellow art student friends, or is art to convey a message? If art is to convey a message, then whatever helps you get that message across is fine and valid. And there's sometimes this thing of just doing it the hard way for the sake of bragging rights or something. I don't know. But there is also another thing. So, for instance, when I was in animation school, and we're taught to, here I'm just working on one of Willie's drawings, but when we were taught to do cleanup, one of the things we were taught was to get really close to the image. And again, this is in traditional animation, so you're putting your head closer to the page. You can't zoom in with a tool. But what you do is this: you do very I'm going to use black so it's nice and obvious. Use these kinds of lines where you're kind of overlapping the previous line. You're going very slow, and you're creating a very solid line. And the advantage of this is because you're going like step by step, it's really accurate. And the other advantage is you can add line width after. But you can teach this to pretty much anyone, and they can kind of do it fairly quickly. The disadvantage is it takes a really long time. And when they would, like the teachers were teaching us this, they also said, this isn't how professionals actually draw. They just, go like boom, boom, get it in. But because they were trying to teach it to a technique that anyone can do, you can get this very slow cleanup line, and anyone can do it. So what you have to ask yourself then is, first of all, is this cleanup line easier? Yes. But is there a downside? Yes, it's much slower. So what you could do is weigh those two things. What do you care about more? Do you want to be fast? Because if you want to be fast and make those big, nice lines, you have to draw with your arm. You have to make a lot more mistakes in the short run, practice a lot more, really build up your mileage, but then at the end, you'll be much faster. So it's kind of like, if you have the two methods, one of them, let's make like a thing of like slow and then, slow, fast over time. So the one where you're very careful is very slow over time, but it's doable. The other one, you're even slower in the beginning because you need tons of mileage, but then you speed up. So this one is faster in the beginning and you get better results. The one where you're slowly, going around, but it's not that one is wrong and one is right. It's just which are you willing to invest in?
They've got their benefit. They've all got their costs and benefits, and you got to find out which one's just the better deal.
Exactly. And maybe which one suits you better, because there is no perfect thing that like, well, this is right, because I've learned techniques that I've gotten them to work, but I just didn't enjoy doing that. Like ones with tons of layers, for me, it was a pen tool. Like the pen tool is really good at making lines and making them super clean and stuff. I love that look. When I see it with other artists, I'm like, damn, that looks really cool. When I try and do it, it's like, this is getting in the way of my experience in making art. I do not enjoy the journey when I do this. Whereas for other people, it might not do that at all. So you have to figure out who are you and what do you like to do. You know, some people like painting with like 100 layers. Other people like painting on one layer. And it doesn't mean the people who paint on one layer don't know how to use layers. It's not like, haha, you suck. You don't even know how to use layers. Maybe they just enjoy the process more.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, because like it's not just about the end result, how the final image looks. It's the like thing is, you still got to walk a path to get to that destination, and if the path itself feels really, really terrible, you're not going to be able to sustain it as an artist. Like, because if you're a career artist, that means you're going to be doing this stuff day in and day out, and if you're constantly walking a path that you hate, then you're just not going to sustain it. You're just going to hate your job eventually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it means that you need to not just find out ways to make the nice final image that you like, but also find the best path for you to get there. And sometimes just realize, be willing to accept sometimes, like there's been times here, for a concrete example, there's people like Sakimi-chan who make fantastic artwork. And I've seen, you know, some of her tutorials, and I think, yeah, it's a very effective way to get that look. But the thing is I feel that I didn't like the technique because I felt that it created too much stylistic drift. And what I mean by stylistic drift is I have one style in mind, I have a particular image in mind, and I like to get there as quickly as possible, because the more time that the process takes for me to do it, the less I kind of remember what I was trying to do in the first place. And so eventually, you know, you get these nice results that she's got, but the thing is that I don't like the fact that it takes so long, because I would wind up losing my way and I don't get the original vibe and feeling that I had in the beginning, right? So it's just not the right technique for me. It's not the right path for me, because for me, what's important in my final image is that I nail the idea that I had in the beginning, and it's got to be just as fresh as, like, the idea in the final drawing has to be just as fresh as the image at the beginning. The idea that motivated the drawing in the first place. So, like I say, I'm not knocking her art. I'm just saying I don't think I will ever be able to make art that looks like hers, because I don't like the process to get there. The process doesn't suit me. I'm not suited for that kind of work. I can still look at that stuff and really enjoy it though.
Yeah, I mean, some people really like detail, and they get in sort of a Zen state and create tons and tons of intricate detail. And other people, like for myself, I really struggle with that. I get bored very fast. And if I get the big idea, I feel like I'm done. I don't really want to do more. I will do more just for an effect. But just adding detail for the sake of detail is quite not fun for me. But for other people, it's super fun. So you have to figure out, who are you? And so there's no easy answers, and there's also no right answer. There's no right or wrong. And if you're thinking about things as this is the way it should be, especially when you hear intermediate artists or beginner artists, they tend to be the most sure about something. You got to do this. How do I get good? You got to look at Lumos. Yeah. This person's good. Oh, Kim Jong-il's better. Yes. Okay. What? It's like, be wary of people with absolute answers, because chances are there's not only one way. All right. And okay, so looking at this image, which has been censored a little bit. Let's just talk about it. So the first thing I notice is, I mean, it's good to use reference, but this leg thing is like, these legs are far apart, and the reference, they're touching. So I feel like that's a hugely important thing that you wouldn't want to miss. If I'm drawing this, that's like 50% of the image is just this relationship with them being so close that the bodies kind of become one, whereas this is telling a different story. So when you made this, what were you going for? What was the idea?
I was trying to get the rhythms down. I saw that and I was too lazy to fix it, but I was really trying to get the rhythms of the legs down. That's why I kind of pushed it a little more than it is in the video. And I was trying to get the shape of the rib cage down as well. I wasn't worried about anything else. Like, I wasn't going at it as like trying to finish it. I was really just trying to like understand what's going on in that part of the body.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. What I would actually be doing, and of course this isn't saying you should do it this way, but what I would do is probably if I saw this, I would start, and maybe it's easier to actually kind of knock it back a bit. So the way I would start when I see this image is like this with one line, and it's kind of one line going across both of their collarbones. Then I would do this and get this and this. So what this represents is, first of all, there's this line connecting the two of them, and I'm sort of treating them like one being. And then this other line is here, this one going down is this line going around the, a bit much, but it's going around and then it goes down and it's here. So the reason I want to get these is because they're really pushing the fact that these two characters are kind of functioning like one character, especially where their legs meet. So then I'm going to look at their knees. And the reason for that is I want to see where it doesn't touch, and the rest I don't need to include. Like that's all like touching. So if I get the distance apart for the knees, now I have a point I can use to get the rest of that leg. And then I can sort of build the rest of the figure. You know, this one's foot's there, this one's foot's there, this one's got this, tilting their hip, and they're coming around like this. Their arm goes back here. This one's arm comes here. The heads are here. And like that. And this one's coming down, hands here. But in a pretty quick way, you can block down their relationship. And I feel like the relationship is important. And if you want that gesture, I feel like there's gesture going through the both of them. So I wouldn't be drawing them like separate figures, really, if that makes any sense. I don't know if that...
Yeah,
No,
especially because they're in contact.
Yeah.
Yes. And they're also sharing a center of gravity, because...
And they're like they're obviously like it's a pose where they're reacting to each other.
Yeah.
So they can't be seen. They must not be handled separately. They have to be handled together.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I'd also like this line that I'm drawing at the top of their head is this line, which is, again, it's kind of like the color line. Like you've got a line where they have a relationship with each other. You have this negative space between them, which is very important right there. If you get this and this as well, you're capturing, or it's much easier to and this too. It's much easier to look at these abstract shapes and judge them. Like, did I get the heads close enough? So when I look at mine, I got them too close. See here, it's too close. The neck, well, I didn't really get the neck in properly, but that distance is too short. And then this one here, it's okay. And then this one here, it's a bit better, but then see at the leg, I needed a lot more space. So what I would be doing is, okay, telling myself, mental note, look at these negative spaces a bit more. And so what would happen is this knee needs to be way up here. So I put the knee in the wrong spot. And the reason I did is because I didn't notice and I'm just seeing it now, how foreshortened this leg is. Like this knee is down here, this knee is up here. And same with this one. These legs are very foreshortened. So that was something I didn't notice, which I now am noticing. And it makes me think, okay, that's really important to know. And I've got to put that in. So again, I'm not really, see how your knees are very much aligned. And I think I made the same mistake. You didn't for this one. This one's better, but this one on the right really is. So yeah, by no means am I like a perfect artist, and I screwed up in that. You know, I still need to improve, and I definitely will try to keep that in mind. But those are the things I would look at. Also, the biggest thing I see with these two is sort of like a blades of grass or something. Like this feels like it's doing this, and this feels like it's doing that. They feel like two blades of grass, and then some are doing that, and there's that gesture. So I don't know if that's important, but it does sometimes help me to think of things that way. All right. Oh, Mark's doing his own version.
That's right. Well, the thing is that when I see, one thing I used to do when I was life drawing is eventually I got to the point where when I would go to a life drawing session, that I would not try to copy exactly what I saw, but instead I would try to do an art piece, but using the models as reference.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that case, it's like I'm allowed to stray from it, right? I'm like, no, man. Like, how would I draw cartoon characters if they were doing, you know, how would I change things to suit an ideal, right? To tell a real story here, because the thing about the models is that the models have to hold that pose for a while. They don't, you know, they've got to hold the pose for a long time. That's going to kind of limit what they can and can't do. And so I found that, you know, it was better if I came along with a story of my own on the spot and just drew it, you know, in my using the same techniques I would use in the studio, the same techniques I would use if I'm drawing a commission. And the reason I would want to do something like that is, well, I want the life drawing session to apply to my commissions. I want it to apply to my professional workflow. I want it to apply to what happens in the studio. Otherwise, I'm not sure what I'd be doing it for otherwise. So that's why I like to kind of do my own thing when I look at models who are in a pose. As you can see here, like I've made their heads touch, right? I've changed things around. I've really moved one in front of the other. I've really put them in contact, and I even changed their facial expressions to have something going on. So this is another way in which you can look at doing a study. So now it's less of an academic study, and now it's actually putting something there that wasn't there before.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Very cute. Okay. Flavia, maybe you could explain what are all these lines about, and what are you thinking of in this stage of the process?
Well, okay, so because I'm doing this from imagination, I can see that I'm messing up a lot in terms of the form. So I'm basically just giving myself a critique, like a draw over. So in terms of the skull, I realized that I was pretty much just focusing on the nose and getting an expression, and it's a pretty derpy expression, but I kind of neglected the ears completely. And then I thought, well, I should draw where the ears are sort of being anchored, which is like here and here, kind of like on the back and stuff. And then this one wouldn't come this far. But then I thought, like, oh, why don't I give her non-cat ears? So see how that looks. And then because I cropped the picture, I kind of have to change the composition so it looks nicer. So I'm also drawing over the tail and giving it a different shape and trying to get the light and dark stuff to work better because I wasn't happy with it. So I think that's it.
Well, I think it's really good, an idea to be critiquing your own work as if it's like, yeah, giving yourself a critique.
Yeah,
It's a smart
I
thing to do.
I like the limited palette. The fact that there's not like a gazillion different colors, which makes it very easy to still move things around and do any corrections before you get into it. So it looks really good. Like
Thanks.
the limited palette, I think that works well with what you've got.
Yay.
I think though before you settle into details, it's kind of important to make sure that the picture's reading clearly before you get really into the details, because when you got to move things around, it's like, I gotta get rid of these details all of a sudden. So I can understand that can be
Yeah, because I have no reference. It's very like, I have to move things around much more because I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do with it, and because I haven't there was so much dust on this tablet when I opened up the computer for streaming, like literally dust. So I didn't remember how to use Clip Studio. I was like, what does this brush do? Why did I make this one? Why did I? So, yeah.
Well, I would say, in that case, I mean, if, you know what? Sometimes it's really nice to just plow ahead without any plan. And all I can say is in these particular situations is make the canvas bigger and start additional doodles in the corners. And you can just chalk this up to a warm-up drawing and not worry too much about having to make it absolutely perfect and trying to turn it into like a finished illustration where everything's got to be great. I think if you're starting out with just saying, hey, let's not bother with making like a huge grand design magnum opus thing, then just accept that the scope of the project will be small. And if you find that that's as far as you can push something before the flaws start to really reveal themselves, then just bail on it and just say, here, let's just start another one. And maybe if I want to push it further, then I'll plan more. But that's what I find is I find that it's hard to push a work beyond what I initially planned for. Usually I find though is that the really good pieces are the ones where just through some lucky happenstances, then the drawing is held up and I'm able to push it further and push it further and push it further still. But I won't force myself to push a drawing, to be like this finished illustration.
Yeah, I like to do a bunch of sketches before actually committing to something, but even if I tend to go with the first one, but with this time I actually wanted to work on a commission during the stream, but the computer can't handle it, the size of the file, so I just doodled.
Well, actually, I just speaking of computer problems, like literally like 10 minutes ago, my Stream Relay computer, which I was using, is running Windows 10 and it decided to update. It updated and rebooted. So all of my watchers just go like, hey, where'd the stream go? And I'm having to awkwardly get into the chat and say, oh yeah, Windows 10 decided to update.
Thanks a lot, Windows 10. You sure know when you're wanted.
No.
Okay. So we've got time for maybe one more question. We've only got a couple minutes left, but Rado Maleshkov says, guys, I can do all these things and I don't even know if I can apply for some kind of job. I am classic artist with education, done anatomy and all, and never tried to do anything. I would say there is a big difference between training and actually working. And there's a bunch of stuff that you don't really get taught in school. And one of the things is, how to promote yourself, how to socially, how to do social networking, sometimes how to be a nice person.
I think another key thing would be to know what it is that the companies, what the companies that you'd like to work for want.
Yeah.
So where would you like to work? Are you planning on working for, I don't know, a comic book company, like a place that does comics or does video games? Or were you looking at doing private commissions? Or were you looking at, figure out, what you want to do with your art, and then figure out what they're looking for, what these companies are looking for. Very often, they're not just looking for portfolios. They're often looking for actual work experience. So you're probably going to want to find something that is like an intermediary job. So for instance, if you were to work for a video games company, maybe what you would do is you try to make artwork which you'd use for, like, find some modding groups, some places which are modding video games, and then start making concept art for them, right? Because that way you can show, hey, like, a little bit about the tools that are used in that process, and you know how to work within that workflow. Like, if you're going to work for a larger employer, they want somebody who can hit the ground running. They want somebody who's already, like, they really don't want to have to train people up if they can avoid it, right? Like, so if you can find some sort of intermediary job in between, or like a thing that you can do in between, that will really, really help your chances of getting hired.
Mm-hmm. And
give you a real leg up.
Do you like to work with people or by yourself? Like, what are you? What is your personality type? Because if you like people, some people, they kind of need to work in a studio. They enjoy, the energy and bouncing ideas off other people. Other people may actually hate that. So for myself, I didn't really like that, and so I much rather do stuff on my own. But that also is because I can do that. Like, I don't need someone to tell me, hey, you got to draw today. It's like I tell myself that. So there's that. Another thing I could say, because I've recently, I wouldn't say super recently, but like in a year or so, kind of experimented with trying new things and trying different forms of art. And one of the things I did was just make art, and doing art for free or for virtually nothing is not a bad thing necessarily. So there is this this thing where people are kind of like, don't work for free, and that's true in a way. But the advantage is when there's no pressure, you can really do things and get work experience. And even if you're working for very cheap in the beginning, I think work experience is really important. And having the freedom to try a lot of different things can be more important than necessarily getting paid or getting paid a lot. And then I think of it a bit like an internship, where you get to try a bunch of things. There's no cost. I mean, you need probably either help support from outside, or you need to have a part-time job or maybe a full-time job or something to support yourself. But it does give you the freedom to try different things and see what works for you, and then build up your skills. And then when your skills get better, okay, then start charging more. And you'll also have more of an understanding and a direction. And what people will be paying you for is your professionalism, is your experience. So when people just start out, I think one of the things of demanding a high price can actually be detrimental. And I've heard artists talk about you never want to work for free or whatever, and people exploit you. And it's like, yes, but if you never work for a very cheap price or something, you just might never get the experience you need for people to trust you to hire you in a way. So
I would say that the moment you find yourself swamped with work, raise your prices. It's time to raise your prices.
Yeah.
Because there's always going to be people who are looking for free work, and so they're always looking for free art. So the thing is that when you start there, you're probably going to get swamped with requests, and then eventually you're going to just have to start ramping. Like, if you start finding yourself getting swamped, then it's time to raise your prices until you find that you can handle it.
Yep.
And don't be afraid to raise those prices when you're swamped.
Yeah, and they're not gonna if your prices are unreasonable, people will just stop paying you. So it's kind of like the market decides.
Yep. And when you raise your prices, like some people will fall away, but that's okay, right? Because what'll happen is then, the people who are still willing to pay those prices will stick around, and that's fine. You can just say, look, I'm really, really swamped. I actually have to I gotta raise my prices here. You guys won't leave me alone. So I'm raising my prices a bit. Like, that's how you could put it, right? It's just, it's not that you're trying to gouge more people. It's not that you're trying to gouge people. It's just that you feel that, hey, you can actually get a better price for your work.
Yeah. And he said,
you can't keep up with the demand.
Find people who will pay for these services. There are art sites, different types of art sites. It's you gotta find out what your someone says you got to join. Penta Puri says you got to join a community with people interested in the same type of art. Yeah, you kind of have to find out where these things are, and that's the whole networking, figuring out your audience thing, and that's why it's important to find what you like, because if you don't know what you like, it's really hard. And one more thing I'll say is, let's say you wanted to work in a studio, and you know the studio you want to work for. Well, make sure you cater your work to that studio, and don't be like, well, I'm gonna do a bunch of life studies, and they're drawing dragons and elves and warriors and stuff, and I'm just gonna keep doing my academic life drawings. It's like, no, take that skill you have and draw the dragons and whatever, and then your work, like, try to cater yourself to a studio, and then that way artists can be seen as, just providing a service, like you're a tool. But that's just the reality of it, is that, at times, it's not so pretty. So I guess that's all I have. Okay, so pretty much that's it. We're out of time. Thank you, everyone who for tuning in, and I want to give special thanks to the guests. Thanks, Willie, for providing your images, showing up. Thanks, Flavia, for drawing cats. Thanks, Mark, for the sage wisdom and for drawing things too. And thanks, Bob, as always, for being Bob.
Well, let's see what Bob's drawn. Bob has drawn some amazing stuff as usual. Holy cow.
Yeah.
No, with no guidelines. I didn't see any guidelines.
All right. Well, thanks, everyone. Thanks for tuning in, and take care. Bye.
See ya.
All right. Bye, everyone.
All right.